Good evening, and welcome to the No Commercial Potential Show here on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace, and if you're tuning in for the first time, thanks for joining us. I'm happy to say that you found a very positive space here, because on this show we explore the lives of people from around the world, from all walks of life, and from throughout history, who had every reason to believe that their lives would not amount to much, but who are today household, even iconic names. In our first episode, we explored the life and works of the late great Frank Zappa, from whom the name of the show and of my fake band is derived. Early in his career, Zappa sent off samples of his work to various record companies, and one of them wrote back, returning his recordings, saying that while they were frankly in awe of his incredible musical ability and creativity, they sadly felt that his work had no commercial potential whatsoever. The No Commercial Potential banner, however, isn't just a clever band name or an event in one musician's life. It's a metaphor for everyone who took their best shot at greatness, and even just their best shot at goodness within their own lives, and were told, you can't do that, by people purportedly in the know about what can and cannot be done. So this show is about the people who faced down the naysayers, some of whom residing even in their own hearts, and if they didn't always realize their dreams during their lifetimes, left something lasting, beautiful, and important behind them for the rest of us. Good evening. You're listening to the No Commercial Potential Show here on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace. It's my honor tonight to finally sit down with the transplendent Leon Russell, whom you may better know as the creative core of the British progressive rock band WARMRAIN. I say finally because it's been my privilege to know Leon, albeit in two dimensions, for some 3 years now through Twitter. But this will be the first time that we two have ever spoken face-to-face, albeit via Zoom, as I'm in Canada and Leon is all the way across the Atlantic in the UK. If you haven't yet heard the music of WARMRAIN, in particular their 2019 album Back Above the Clouds, you've been missing out on something beautifully transcendent on the modern music scene. When I listen to Leon's work, I'm transported from a world too often blinded by its own sources of darkness to places where we can breathe, hope, love, and simply be again. To really grasp the meaning of Back Above the Clouds, it helps to understand something about Leon Russell's philosophy of life, some of which we'll be hearing tonight. As Leon himself puts it, I believe that we all come from a source of energy, and that source of energy has a frequency of vibration. As you grow older, that vibration becomes affected, distorted by life and by circumstances. As a child, your feelings, your thoughts, these are the real you. They are you before you get influenced by your family, by society, by teachers, and before everything gets shaped, clipped off, inhibited, and so on. There then becomes a void as people start to live vicariously through their heroes. Attention is focused outside of themselves. What you need is a reconnection with the child within, a means to shift your perception back inside yourself and reconnect with the core aspect of your being, which you've not really had a dialogue with for years. So the irony within Back Above the Clouds is that the man should be the stronger character. The child should be protected by the man. But in terms of this story, it's the other way around. And this brings about a process of healing and thereby of self-fulfillment. A truly gifted multi-instrumentalist and inspired lyricist, and in my esteem, an absolute natural at evoking expansive oral environments that still remain open to interpretation and exploration by the listener, Leon Russell's genuine love of music and his capacity for love itself shine brightly and powerfully through every WARMRAIN song I've yet heard. There's a kind of calm, a clarity in his music that still retains what Pete Townsend once called the fire in the belly of modern music. And it'll be my privilege to share several of WARMRAIN's songs with you tonight. Leon and I very quickly found a connection, I flatter myself, as artists, then as human beings on separate but strikingly similar journeys. We've shared works in progress together before their release, shared important thoughts and feelings, I again flatter myself, as friends. And at this point, I consider him a brother. Leon Russell, welcome to the show. It's wonderful having you here.
Thank you, brother.
I'd like to start off with a bit of background. We're almost of the same vintage. You're turning 51 next week, I think.
This is true.
Happy birthday in advance. You were
you.
born in Chester, I believe, to your mother Sandra and your father Jack in 1972, the year of the rat, in the Chinese calendar. I can't tell you the number of times I've wished I was born in 71 or 73 for that reason alone. Uh, but your vocation outside music has been as a tiler, working with stone, marble, porcelain, and ceramics. But more recently, you've had training as a celebrant, and we're eager to hear more from you about your spiritual journey and its intersection with your life as an artist. But first, one of three children in your family. Your parents were music lovers, but not players, I understand. Did their love of music inspire yours, and if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. They inspired me. And it was a very direct and noticeable connection that they had with the music that they loved. So, I could see how they interacted with music and how they sung along to everything and how they moved with the dancing. And it just showed me the value of music really in somebody's everyday life, really, how you form a relationship with these songs that speak to you. And in their case, not being songwriters, I guess somebody else spoke on behalf of them and articulated their thoughts and feelings. And that's why they were able to embody the songs that they sung along to with such passion, really, because it was their own thoughts and feelings that somebody else had put into life. And it's definitely a responsibility that I feel as a songwriter is like, it's up to you to articulate things for people who can't articulate things so that they go, oh my God, that's exactly what I feel. That's exactly what I would say. That's exactly
Yes,
how I would do it.
yes. Do you have specific recollections from your childhood of artists that articulated your parents' feelings for them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my dad, who by his own admission was very much tone deaf, I've got a wonderful memory of coming down the stairs and the door was slightly ajar to the living room, and I looked through the gap and I could see him sitting on the sofa, and I could hear something which made me wonder about whether or not I might need to call for medical assistance because it wasn't particularly harmonious in any sense. And he had headphones on and he was singing along to Bob Dylan.
Oh,
And it sounded like he was in pain. It sounded like he was struggling, but I could see it was Lay Lady Lay and he was away with the
yes.
fairies. And for mum, it would have been the Beatles, definitely. And, I think back to the track, which probably I would say was the first thing that really struck me, and it was Love Me Do, the
Hmm.
harmonica hook.
Yes.
And I find this to be very, very powerful because, Alan Watts, the great philosopher, something that he said about our ability to hear melody actually rests upon our capacity to hear the silence between the notes.
Yes.
Because were we not able to distinguish silence, then we wouldn't be able to identify the position of the melody. And if I think back to the dee 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 dee, and those like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's actually something really interesting if you want to sort of expand your understanding of time and temporal time, because music actually bridges dimensions of time. It connects the past, the present, and the future in the sense that you need to hold a melody in your awareness in order to fully embrace it and connect with it. So as I'm listening to dee, 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 I'm remembering the notes that preceded the note that exists in that second that I'm hearing it, and I'm anticipating the notes of the future. So there's something really, really deep and profound about music and listening to music. And I certainly experienced that firsthand from those two.
That's that's powerful. And I sense that time and its passage may be a theme in your work.
You sense correctly.
Yeah. Well, in the time that we have. I've discussed with you before how the theme of this program is centered around people from all around the world and from all walks of life who may have had good reasons to believe that, from the beginning, their lives might not amount to much, but who today have a voice and who've gifted the rest of us with something lasting and beautiful in one form or another, whether it's in the field of visual art or science or music or social activism or what have you. Having gotten to know you somewhat over the past 2 years, I'm wondering if there may have been times when you might have felt like life might not amount to much, specifically that your dreams as an artist or your dreams, period, might not come true. And I wonder if you'd please share some of that part of your lived experience with us and what that means to you now.
Yeah, what a beautiful question, and also what a beautiful motivation to do the programs that you do. Not that I'm surprised because I know you and I know what's in your heart, but
Thank you.
yeah, how beautiful is that? Yeah, I definitely experienced the entire plethora of just complete confidence and single-mindedness of locking onto a target and just going, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to achieve, interspersed with large periods of inactivity or no results or nothing seeming to come from what I was doing. I was obviously aware of the things that I wasn't doing as well. For example, I probably didn't have a bank account till I was 28. I didn't learn to drive until I was in my 30s. I didn't really take a day job seriously until I was, I don't know what age, but all these other things, it's like they can all go on the back burner because I'm doing this first. And that's what has brought about the way that I do my music to the degree that I do it, because I focused on it so single-mindedly for all that time. But I think, I think I can explain this in a couple of ways. I could say to you that as a young teenager, you might be attracted, most people are probably attracted to the front man or the lead guitarist because they're at the front, they can see what they're doing, and they get the rock star vibe, and kids might look and go, oh, I want that adoration. I want to be that person that's in the spotlight. And I can remember that phase and that fading to the point where you just simply go, I would like to do this for a living. I'd like to pay my bills by doing this. I don't need the rock star glamour that I was maybe attracted to as a young teenager. And then also, I think some of the feedback that I've had since Back Above the Clouds, how incredibly powerful that's been on the truest, deepest levels, have really been like, they've overshadowed anything that you could possibly have imagined. You might not be on tour going around the world for 40 weeks of the year and playing to hundreds of thousands of people, but when somebody sends you a message privately to say that this song has really, really helped them with the loss of somebody, or there's one chap who contacted me and said that he'd lost his dad to dementia over a period of time, and then he listened to one of the Warm Rain songs and it reminded him of all the good times they spent together before his dad started to slip into the fog. And now he had two songs in his life which connected him with the memory of his father. And people who've said, this is the best song I've ever heard. Your album's one of my top 10 records of all time. I've just been talking
And
to
one of
some.
mine, I might add, Leon. I have to say that Back Above the Clouds instantly became part of my personal emotional landscape from the time that I first heard it. So I'm very grateful to you for that piece of work.
Wow. Well, there you go. See, so, if somebody gave me a Grammy and it was made of solid gold, I would probably say melt that down, make it into as many small pieces as possible, give those pieces to the poor people whose
Mm.
lives would benefit from that gold, because I've just been paid off in ways that are far, far beyond that by people's honest thoughts and feelings.
Well, I've I've characterized your work as progressive rock, perhaps rashly. Do you agree?
I think, because the tracks are generally 7, 8, 9 minutes long, then we can't really escape that format in terms of a model that's been assigned to the music. I quite like it when people say melodic prog, or I actually like art rock as well as a
Hmm.
distinction. I think that's really nice. Um, I think the definition of progressive rock in my lifetime has been almost like I describe it like an oil slick, really, which has started to spread and um, now contains artists and music that historically you would never have put under that banner, but which have
Yes.
been drawn into that category for whatever reason. So it's almost like a living genre that doesn't represent what it did when, say, you and I were kids, and it probably meant Yes and Genesis and stuff.
Yes. Right.
Even
Yeah.
Muse, someone says Muse, or I've heard people say Kate Bush or Tears for Fears and things like that. And I'm like, okay.
Right. Yeah. I've had the same reaction. I've, that's been a bit of a head scratcher for me, but I do see your point about kind of expanding well beyond what were once thought its natural limits. Certainly up until the late 70s, and I think perhaps in an attempt to survive, much as jazz needed in the 1980s, there was a bit of an adjustment there as well. Groups like
Yeah.
Yes and Rush and Genesis and all of that. But that's fascinating. How would you describe your creative process? One of my inspirations, a Canadian named Daniel Lanois, once said that he sits down in the studio, hits record, and just plays until something interesting happens. And that's been kind of an inspiration to me. But what is your process like?
So I sort of like to explain it as, so to say, like, sound is like part of the vocabulary of the emotion and the thought. So let's say I'm in a particular frame of mind and I pick up my guitar and I come up with a riff, and that riff is going to reflect the frame of mind that I'm in at the moment that I play the guitar. And it'll probably have a tempo and a feel that is aligned with how I'm feeling.
Right.
And then I might pick up the guitar the next day. I'll be in a different frame of mind. I'll play the same riff with a slightly different emphasis, because it's not the riff itself, it's the feeling that you're imbuing the riff with that's making it what it is. And I like to try and keep the music in that state, in its incubation period, in that flux, that flexibility of interpretation, until I find that sweet spot for the riff. And then once I find where it sits emotionally, then I'll probably start to play it round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And then I'll start to hear something in my mind and go, and I'll frame a little tiny melody that will be made up of gobbledygook words. And then I will start to change those words into real language that encapsulates the feeling of the melody that's in line with the riff. And then once that happens, I'll go, okay, this song is about da-da-da. And then after that, then I'll probably very quickly find the next riff, and then I'll get the pen out at some point and I'll turn these scribblings into actual verses. And then it will start to take shape in front of me. It's almost like presents itself to me. I like to think of it like when you hear about some sculptors and they'll say like the statue already exists within the
Yes.
block of stone and you've got to find it. It's like that with the tracks. They already exist as a complete track. And I need to give it the freedom to present itself to me.
What a beautifully clear way of putting all of that. You've clearly spent some time thinking about this. Um, do you ever find that, I mean, trust me, I hear you when you say that, okay, the song is about diddle-a-doo, because I've been there many times. And Have you ever experienced, perhaps as I have, all right, you've completed, say, the lyrics, and the song has been discovered, and then perhaps several years later, what seemed to be a lot of evocative words that were beautiful and potent for their own reasons, but perhaps not necessarily communicating a specific uh, program, if you will. Perhaps years later, you hear them and go, "Oh, that's what I was saying." Perhaps with the benefit of subsequent experience or spiritual insight.
Lovely, yeah, brilliant. So the way I would like to respond to that is to talk about when something has a frequency of truth, there's an elasticity to the meaning, and it becomes like, in part of my spiritual vocabulary, you'd sort of say something's like a living document, and that has got an elasticity based upon your level of awareness. So if, say, for example, the Dark Side of the Moon album, you could come back to Dark Side of the Moon after 10, 15, 20 years, and you could listen to it and you could go, oh my God, I've never noticed those keyboards in that section, and that vocal mixes with that, and blah, blah, blah. So nobody snuck into my house the night before, took my Dark Side of the Moon vinyl, run off, repressed a new version of it with these bits in, and then popped it back in before I noticed. They
Right.
were always there. What's
Yes.
changed is my awareness. My awareness has expanded because I'm a progressive person. I can't help but always want to evolve. So once I have evolved and then I come back and look at this living document afresh from who I am in a new moment in time, if the art is deep enough and it's been created with such a scope and wide parameters for you to revisit it and discover stuff, then there will be meaning that you didn't detect last time. And interestingly, that you should ask that. I didn't listen to Back Above the Clouds for a long time, and I had to do a journey a couple of months ago. That was the exact duration of the entire album, and there was so much stuff in it that I'd forgotten about. I heard it fresh. Because we went to crazy details. We had like a delay on the vocals, and then I'd put like harmony on the delay as the vocals are fading out, and and I kind of saw it all afresh and appreciated what I'd done. And I was
Isn't
like,
that a beautiful experience?
yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah. It's a bit that you remind me of the Greek philosopher who said one cannot dip one's foot in the same river twice. And you know, when you say that the album hasn't been changed, but you have, and that's one of the beautiful things about music and making it, the gift of being able to make it, I think. Um, which leads me to, you know, the subject matter of some recent conversation we've had. Um, your life has is in motion. It's taking some strikingly different turns, vocationally and spiritually. And if I'm not wrong, I mean, I've known you for a few years now, and I know that you have had a focus much more, I would say, upon the spiritual reality of life, as opposed to what we take to be the reality, the layers of illusion and all that causes so much stress, perhaps needlessly, um, and perhaps a role of a Course in Miracles in your life that I know that you are now an online contributor to. So I wonder if you might share with us a bit about all of that, how your view is changing and how it's affecting your vocational life, and if you please.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've studied A Course in Miracles since 1993. It's an incredible self-study spiritual system. It uses the language of Christianity, but it presents it in like agnostic Christianity. So it's not the traditional model, but the language is stuff that you'd recognize.
Sure.
And I've always written music from this understanding, but I've done it in a way that I did it surreptitiously, really. So my lyrics were always informed by my spirituality, but I've made a conscious effort to try and present the lyrics in a way that's got a multi-dimensional interpretive format. Love's the most important thing in the entire universe for me, as
Oh,
documented.
yes. Tattooed on the four fingers for the listener's sake. That's beautiful.
And and that's, you know, I struggled to write about anything else other than love, really, and the human experience, and like you say, like a metaphysical aspect of life, because that's kind of where I sit as a person. And yeah, I've had like an inner calling within the last couple of months. I was asked to write an article on A Course in Miracles, and that's kind of given me the permission I needed to talk about something which was like private, really, and to find a community of people who also love this system and who also find great value in the peace that it leads you to once you remove the interference, to the awareness of love's eternal presence. So we have a very physical human 3D existence. And like you alluded to, that puts us in a position where we feel the stresses and the trials and the tribulations, and they're very real. And it's really important to not, say, for example, if there's somebody that you know who's having a very turbulent time, it's not appropriate to drop in with something metaphysical and go, oh, well, don't worry, nothing real is threatened, nothing unreal exists. We're
Right.
all just like, it's like, whoa, this person is right in the thick of it at the moment. And there's a time and place for looking at stuff from the bigger picture point of view. And there's also a time and place for sitting next to someone and just being with them.
Yes.
One of my favorite phrases is silence is the magnification of words. And, words at best are symbols, and they're symbols of symbols. And there's a whole reality that exists beyond words. And in today's world, with the movement in quantum physics, the movement of the cognitive sciences, that we're understanding, there's two main fundamental drives. There's one which is based upon consciousness is fundamental and reality is an epiphenomenon of consciousness. And then in reverse, people would say that reality is fundamental and consciousness is an epiphenomenon based or coming into existence as a consequence of reality. But fundamentally, our existence is mind. We are a mind. We're in a body. And thought is the level of creation. And in a sense, there is no world outside of the mind, because the world is an effect. It's not the cause. So the way you're feeling inside yourself determines how you perceive the world. And the way you're feeling inside yourself calls forth the witnesses which attest to the perspective that you're currently looking at the world from. And it could be a very simple thing such as looking at the weather, often sort of refer to looking at the weather and, deciding on whether it's favorable weather conditions. The weather of itself has no consciousness. I'll often say to people, on Saturn, there's lightning bolts that are like over 1,000 miles long, and there's nobody there to witness them. Is that bad weather? And the winds are like 1,100 miles an hour. Does somebody think that's bad weather? Because there's no one there to witness it. And that comes back
Right.
to the Zen kind of perspective of if a tree falls over in a forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Because sound is something that's perceptive, that relies upon a mind to interpret it and process it. And my own kind of take on that is like, if there's an apple on a tree and there's nobody there, there's no conscious agent to eat that apple, does it taste of anything?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'm very much about the fact that I understand the nature of reality from a metaphysical point of view, but I'm also a human being amongst billions of other human beings, and I want to be able to speak their language in a way that talks to them, whilst consciously imbuing that language with a frequency that speaks to their higher selves and to their mind, even though they might not be aware of it.
I've noticed that very much in your work that the appeal to universal themes
Hmm.
about the human experience, not tied down to any specific personalities or specific historical events or social or political ills or what have you, but really about the timeless. Thank you very much for that. We've got a selection of your songs that I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about individually as we go. And the first one is Luminous Star, More Than a Memory.
Wow.
And on my exposure to your work, the 12 string seems to be a recurring kind of backbone in a lot of your songs. Am I right about that?
I think you might be picking up on open tunings because I haven't got a 12 string, but I do use an acoustic guitar, or I did on Back Above the Clouds,
Oh,
based everything on an acoustic line. So in a nod to the traditional way of writing music, it was the way that I built Back Above the Clouds was to do a live performance of an entire song on acoustic guitar with a vocal performance. And then I had a fantastic engineer who then took away the tracks, and in his own time he created a click map so that it wasn't regimented. It moved with the feel of the slight increases and decreases in tempo that a human being would apply to riffs as they rise and fall. And then when he came back with the click map, then I was able to play the drums to the click, and then we were able to put the bass on, and then we would swap the acoustic guitar with the correct finished line, put the vocals on, put the electric guitar lines on, the vocal harmonies, put the strings on, and build it up very much in the same way that you would do if it started from everybody playing in the room live together, but you're only actually recording the drums, which
beautiful.
is the traditional way. So it kept a very human element to it, and it made it less mechanical than all this modern music, which is on the grid.
Now, in Luminous Star, the line, these moments, they'll always be more than a memory. Where did that come from at its heart? What does that mean to you, more than a memory?
Mm. That's a great question. Yeah, these moments. So I guess it's like a sense of there's a presence of an energy in a moment that will just stay with you beyond the memory itself.
Beautiful. Well, and with that, in the presence of this moment and its energy, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Luminous Star, More Than a Memory by Warm Rain.
moments, they'll always be more than a memory. Real moments, they'll always be more than a memory. 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 When you were around, there was a light within your eyes. Really blows my mind. When I stop to think of you and all the good you caused, it brings a halt to time. These moments, they'll always be more than a memory. Real moments, they'll always be more than a memory. 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 When you walked this earth, you carved a path all of your own, with energy like fire. When I stop to think of you and all the love you brought, I come alive inside.
The next track I'd like to talk with you about and hear your thoughts on it is clock watching. And you know, I want to say I absolutely adore how you've built the song's tempo around the ticking clock. With Alan Watts talking about the meaning of time in the background. And there are times, as with this song, when honestly, my friend, I conceptually I feel like you and I may have been separated at birth because and I mean that as a far greater compliment to me than to you. By which I mean I'm a great admirer of that sort of evocation that can so easily be overdone, but with which you've always, I think, found the perfect balance. Even the arpeggiated notes on the guitar in the first half of the song capture that repeating cycle of the clock so beautifully. Now, halfway through this track, the mental picture morphs into something much more immediate and intense. And in those changes, I sense some intention to express different phases of time and its passage. And in those, so, you know, Einstein considers it time a force of nature in its own sense. But there are still important ways in which, as you've said, it's a faculty of human perception, passing slowly sometimes and far too quickly at others, like in times of crisis. But this song resolves much as it began with a ticking clock, but this time against the sound of the ocean tide. And I'm thinking perhaps to capture the flow of time in our carriage on it, like floating on water. But those are just my impressions. Are they close at all? And if not, where were you going?
I think that's lovely for me to hear because, yeah, you're exactly right with your interpretation of it, which means I did my job correctly, which is to present this thought via sound, via lyrics, via sound effects, via a structure, a journey, isn't it? Soundscaping. And yeah, I mean, time, clock watching, you know, probably, you know, it's a very visual set of lyrics for me. It's the only Warm Rain song that Matt Lerwill sings. And then I come in with this really top range, like force in my voice kind of response to the melancholic kind of flat level delivery that he's done. And I purposefully wanted him to do it because I knew he could do it with his energy. And then the counterpoint would be this really projected vocal from me, which only occurs a couple of times, but to great effect. And it kind of like signals that something is coming as well. It was a real joy to do that in the studio. It was the last song that we've recorded. So although it came out probably before Back Above the Clouds, it's the most recent studio recording that's been released by Warm Rain. So I like to look at that from a term of evolution and to see where I'm getting to with what I like to put together. And it's very rewarding in that sense because it's a lot of people have found it quite cinematic, that song, you know.
Yes.
One of my best friends in the world, he just like, there's a particular experience that he had on the beaches in France, and he was walking up and down on his own, just really enjoying the experience, and he just listened to clock watching probably like 30-40 times on the bounce.
Wow.
Because it just completely and utterly hit the nail on the head for that experience. And yeah, and other
I can
people,
see how.
yeah, I've had people say, oh, this is like a movie, this should be in a movie, you know. And it's like, yeah, it's very satisfying to know that it's a vehicle in which people can find so much meaning, because that's the whole thing of music itself en masse, isn't it? It's a vehicle for other people to find their meaning. It goes back to what you've just said about how you feel about Warm Rain, and it goes back to what I explained about your question about my mum and dad and what they found from music. It's this vehicle. It's like, if you can't write music, if you can't build the vehicle, you need somebody else to build the vehicle that you can inhabit yourself and feel you're on the journey, and that the journey is a journey that suits you, going in a direction that you intend it to go in.
You're like a shipbuilder.
Yes, exactly.
With that, friends, I give you clock watching. We're here with Leon Russell on the No Commercial Potential Show. I'm your host, Brad Wallace. And lend an ear, nay, both ears, to Clock Watching by WARMRAIN.
Time is a very difficult thing to pin down. The famous saying of St. Augustine of Hippo, that when he was asked, what is time? He said, I know what it is, but when you ask me, I don't. And yet it seems absolutely fundamental to our life. Time is money, we say. I don't have enough time. Time flies. Time drags. From the past, through the present, and on into the future, and on into the future, and on into the future.
The sands of time have fallen. The hourglass lies smashed. They drift across the floorboards and slip through the cracks. They're blown down the hallway. And out through the door. Used to be important, but not anymore.
let us suppose, just for the sake of example, that this universe started with a Big Bang, as some cosmologists believe. Now, when that bang happened, it was the present, wasn't it? And so the universe began in what we will call a now moment. Then it goes on doing its stuff. And always, when any event that we now call past came into being, it came into being in the present and out of the present. That's one way of seeing it.
That was Clock Watching by Warm Rain from Back Above the Clouds. We're here with Leon Russell, the creative core of Warm Rain. As we've discussed in rather broad terms, the British progressive rock band. If you haven't heard their work yet, please explain yourselves. In all honesty, no. You will thank yourselves and certainly thank Leon for the body of work that he's bringing to us. Leon, the next song of yours that I'm hoping to hear from you about is "Run to the Sun," and you mentioned Dylan earlier, and I don't know why, but I heard something distinctly Dylan-esque in this from the opening notes. It feels great when we shine from within. Let's not wait for our lives to begin. Let's run to the sun. Your music is so kinetic, for lack of a better word, for me. There's not only a very warm and reassuring emotional space in all of your work, I would say regardless of a song's subject matter, but also, for me, a palpably physical resonance in it. It could just be, I don't know, a touch of synesthesia that I fancy I might have, but there's this deeply physically evocative quality in many of your lyrics, and that's often stood out to me. You seem to be very aware of and pursuing the close connections between mind, body, and spirit in the words to your song. So is that something conscious or intentional in your songwriting? Or would you say, is it just sort of in the nature of what you're uncovering? Because you've said it's sometimes like the statue was always there.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's a reflection of me, and I am conscious of those three elements you describe. And to be fair, I would imagine that my body is probably the thing I'm most disassociated from. So my mind and my spirit, definitely, and then my body is probably third in line, but they all inform one another, don't they? And Run to the Sun is just an incredibly beautiful song. That it's interesting that you got the Bob Dylan thing, because one of the reasons that Run to the Sun is so incredibly important to me is because somebody who passed, who I will be forever in debt to, because they are the father of one of the people who's the most important people in my life. He chose 3 songs at his funeral, and one of them was Run to the Sun. He chose his own music. And he said that he chose this song because it never failed to make him happy. It always made him feel joyful. And I suppose going back to this notion that there's no accolade higher than when somebody comes to you with something as truthful and powerful and poignant as that, that's what Run to the Sun sort of means to me. I can't help but listen to it and reflect upon the funeral that I was present at, and the family and their rawness of their grieving, and this beautiful human being, like a pillar of humanity, an incredible man, and what he represented in this family unit and still represents. And that he held this song in such high regard that he would choose it alongside Highway to Hell by AC/DC and The River by Bruce Springsteen, which are both songs that I really love as well. So I get great joy from listening to this song and from playing it. and from what it represents, really.
It's a beautiful piece, but I have to say, knowing that context for it, it just became all the more beautiful to me. I can't imagine um, the life-altering meaning that must have had for you as an artist, as a human being, really.
Absolutely.
That's truly beautiful.
And this guy was a huge Bob Dylan fan, so I love the fact that you've sensed something Dylan-esque about it.
Yeah. Well, with that, friends, once again, you're listening to the No Commercial Potential Show on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace. We're here with Leon Russell of Warm Rain, and you're about to hear his song, Run to the Sun.
Ain't it great when we both wear a smile? Makes the time that we spend so worthwhile as we run to the sun. It feels great when we shine from within. Let's not wait for our lives to begin, and let's run to the sun. Let's run to the sun. Run with me towards the sun. Run with me towards the warmth of the sun. Run to the sun. Run to the sun. Run to the sun.
And we're back with Leon Russell of Warm Rain. That was Run to the Sun from Back Above the Clouds. And Leon, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the lyrics. You still remember how to fly. It's all right. You've not forgotten how to fly. It's all right. From Live the Dream. Can you unpack this for us? What was the original inspiration for that sentiment? And has the song's meaning changed for you since you first wrote it at all?
Wow, what an incredible question, and what a great display of how astute that is to pick up on that, because It's interesting. One of the only criticisms that Back Above the Clouds got was people going, "Oh my God, this is a bit long, isn't it? You've done a double album." It's like, oh, sorry about that. Nobody's going to come round your house and make you sit there and listen to all 14 tracks. It's like, if you want to listen to one song a month for 14 months, go for it. And, there's people who've like talked about clipping the album to a single album and what songs would drop and blah, blah, blah. And in a sense, Live the Dream, I guess in some lights that could have fell in the category of, for me, of like, would that make it? And yet what I've seen through other people's relationship with that song is it's an incredibly popular song that really means a lot to people. And with Back Above the Clouds, you're talking about a creative project that took 25 years from incubation of thought to manifestation. It went through a lot of different formats in other stories and contexts until I eventually found the story I wanted to tell, which was my own life story. And there's a beautiful phrase that says, fiction is the way that we tell the truth. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but live the dream, the line that you've just picked up on, there was a period in the songwriting. So it's say I wanted to make a concept album for 25 years. It took me 10 years to write Back Above the Clouds. It took me 6 years to record it. I spent £12,000 of my own money in the studio because nobody would want to finance something with huge gaps in between the recording process. And it was a huge endeavor, and there was a period of time before I released it where it belonged to just me, really, and to Matt, my brother in arms, the guitar player. And I used to listen to Live the Dream, and the line that you're referring to used to make me break down into tears because I could hear the purity in my voice of how I was speaking to myself and what that represents in a symbolic sense within the context of the overall story. This is the point where these two aspects of the self, the man and the boy, are no longer seen as dual aspects, with one looking on at the other, but as a combined persona. The man is the boy is the man, and the boy is reminding the man that you still remember how to fly. And the reason I used flight as a symbol within Back Above the Clouds in terms of what it means to the imagination of a child is it's almost like the pinnacle of the expression of imagination. So if you were a young child and you were running around pretending you could fly, chances are you're not pretending you can fly sort of 10 or 15 feet off the ground, because why would your imagination be limited to such constructs? You're thinking that you're above the clouds, you're stratospheric. So this moment where the child within turns to the man and says, you still remember how to fly. And there's another line where it says, I hear the voice again of the child who wants to speak to the man that I've come to be. He wants to say that it's all right. You've not forgotten how to fly. And I just I couldn't get past it without crying because the healing was still going on, because this is my own diatribe. It's my own soliloquy. And once I could listen to it and not cry, I knew that the healing was done and that I was ready to.
I'm sorry, you faded out for a second. You were ready to
share it with other people.
What a beautiful barometer. I can relate very directly to that experience of past work or work in progress bringing me to tears. And it highlights something you said earlier for me, which is how, in a way, there is no world outside of the person, and how ultimately every song is about the writer in some critical kind of way, at least emotionally. And it is a kind of gift, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To have that kind of emotional barometer, to know that healing has taken place. I mean, how many around us would give how much for some gauge for healing that way. And yeah, I'm very grateful for you sharing that insight with me, along with so many others. I want to make sure that listeners understand what the overall concept of back above the clouds is, and I gave a brief summary in your own words at the beginning. Is there anything else that you would want to say to flesh it out on your own in your own words here, so that they would understand the full context of the album?
Thank you. Yeah, I like to think of it as like there's a sentence and then there's a sentence within that sentence. And there's a process and there's a process within that process. So we could separate the two into a physical and a mental experience. So physically, the man has experienced the loss of his hero. It's left a void in his life that needs to be filled. His attention was focused externally, and there's now a gap in his world where there's no place for his attention to rest. And what that does is it inadvertently creates a movement of attention inside of himself, and that is how he remembers himself as a child, as a purer version of himself before the distortions. So something like starts off as fading star, which is like this person's concerns that a physical presence means that an energetic influence will fade. By the end of the entire record, we have luminous star, which is like this star is as bright or brighter than it could ever be, coupled with the song Equilibrium, which the lyrics are keep my feet on the ground, but let my mind rise above the clouds. And that's almost like a yin yang of the man and the boy. It's like the man would keep his feet on the ground and the boy's mind flies above the clouds. So although this tragedy brings him to his knees, it actually is a catalyst for his healing, because were his hero to not pass, then would he have had this process whereby he looked within for the strength that he was looking to outside of himself? And then once he regained that strength, he was able to find a resolution to the loss. Not, you know, you can't play that down. You'll always miss somebody if they meant a lot to you, obviously, but you can find a context for it because there is no other way off this planet other than to pass.
Right.
Yeah, so I think, there's these two processes going on. There's the physical process of losing someone, and then there's the mental process of reconnecting with the inner higher self. You could say the higher self, because the child is closer to source energy from where he came, whether you believe that is a God energy or whether you feel that that is something that happens as a mechanistic materialist occurrence. It's still the same principle. There's still an energy from which you spring, and it has a purer frequency closer to the point at which it originated into the world.
What, may I ask, is your sense of that source personally?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I've had some pretty beautiful revelationary experiences where I have directly known this experience, but I've still known it from within the construct of time and space. So I've had like the contentless consciousness, as I like to call it, where I was absolutely present in high definition in a way that I've never experienced being present before, but I actually also didn't exist as a separate self. I was just blinking in the electromagnetic field of creation. But the thing about creation is because within the construct of, say, electromagnetic energy, it's a wave, and a wave needs two things in order to be in existence. It needs space so that it can oscillate between the peaks and the troughs of the wave, and it also needs time, because a wave can't exist in a point in time. It needs to have a bit of time in order to be a wave. So although I experienced that, and that's just one of the experiences that I knew to be of this dimension, if you like, because, I like one of the modern, I think we really benefit from systems that are greater than our understanding. It's something that's very thematic in human evolution, whether that's our ancient ancestors sitting under the stars and wondering why the sky moves at night the way it does, and that understanding being beyond their grasp, but still offering them everything they need to marvel at this occurrence. To Einstein, for example, he wasn't a mathematician. So when he came up with general relativity, he was coming at it from a physicist's point of view. And a friend of his who was a mathematician took it away when he was done and looked at his equations and come back and said, did you know that this system you've created, it allows for an event called black hole? And he was like, no, 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 no. And he then took all of his workings away. And for quite a few years, he tried to remove the possibility for this because he'd created a system that was cleverer than him. And this is a
Didn't know
really
that.
important part of human evolution. That's why people struggle with the concept of God, because we've ended up with this concept, which is some anthropomorphized sky daddy, and it's all fire and brimstones, and he's waiting to burn you if you do anything wrong. And
Right.
maybe in medieval times, if you were trying to subdue the peasants and get them to put coffers in your pot, this is the way to do it. But in 2023, it just simply doesn't wash with people, because it's an old model. And I like to think of like something like a bicycle. We had, don't know if it's relevant to your cultural history, but like a penny farthing
Mhm.
is like a type of bicycle from Victorian England where the front wheel was like 6 foot tall, the back
Okay.
was tiny, and these things look ridiculous now. But it was a bicycle. And in today's world, we'd have a bicycle which is made of bamboo. Your nan could lift it up with a little finger above her head. It's got 25 gears and you could probably get to the top of the Himalayas on it. It's a
Right.
bicycle. So is a penny farthing is a bicycle. So we have an umbrella term, which is a bicycle. So if I said to you, oh, I've just bought a nice new bicycle, I've just got a new bicycle, the broadness of interpretation of that symbol means that for you, you could be thinking of a penny farthing, whereas for me, I could be thinking of the bamboo bike because we haven't pinned it down to something.
Right.
And in a sense, this is what the deal is with the whole thing with people trying to understand what God is. It's like people trying to use an old model of like an antiquated version of what you should be using uh, uh, to sort of facilitate your growth of understanding. And I like the fact that a couple of the modern guys who are into the neurosciences, they basically say, well, just imagine you've got a VR headset on. And while you've got this VR headset, everything that you see in creation, which is a very, very small aspect, even in the field of light, we only see a tiny little bit of the field of light. We've got two color receptors, and like a pigeon's got five or something. So, even a pigeon's seeing
Right.
more of the lights than we are. And we go around giving ourselves dominion, thinking we know everything like the back of our hands, and we simply don't see things as they are. There's quantitative and qualitative content to reality. Like the color red doesn't exist. It's just
Right.
something that we perceive as a consequence. So to think of yourself wearing a virtual reality headset, and then were you able to take that headset off and to see where you actually are and what you're actually part of, is maybe quite a cool model in 2023 for people to go, oh, okay, right, okay, I can run with that, rather than saying, right, you've got a father in the sky and he's annoyed with you and blah, blah. Just like it's going to
Right.
fall on its face before it's even out the blocks, isn't it?
Well, what's what you're bringing home to me is how timeless truth can be. And that I think it was 600 BCE when Plato was really saying much of what you were just alluding to, the idea of being in the cave facing the wall with the the fire burning behind you, and all you see are the shadows on the wall, and
so powerful.
But bringing it to the perceptual as you have, I've often used as really the most compelling argument for my openness to spiritual truths being my colorblindness.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can misperceive something so basic, then how can I not miss other, perhaps much more important things with my senses, such as the ultimate reality of a spiritual realm. But thank you so much for that. It's a rare privilege of having a program of this kind, and knowing Leon Russell, that I have the opportunity to gain very intimate insights into a piece of work that I've already fallen in love with. So you breathed entirely new life into Back Above the Clouds for me, and I'll hear it. I'll dip my foot into that river yet another time, and it'll be completely different. With that, friends, let's give a spin to Live the Dream. We're here with Leon Russell of WARMRAIN. This is the No Commercial Potential Show, and I'm your host, Brad Wallace. Live the Dream.
Nothing's real, and all I see the child who wants to speak to the man I've come to be. Oh, I hear him calling to me. Oh, I can hear him calling to me. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. You've not forgotten how to fly. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. You still know how to fly. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. You've not forgotten how to fly. It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. You still remember how to fly. It's alright. Not forgotten how to fly. It's alright. You still remember how to fly. It's alright. 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 It's alright.
And that was Live the Dream by Warm Rain from Back Above the Clouds. We're here with Leon Russell, the creative core of Warm Rain. And Leon, for me, the only fitting final song for us to feature tonight is Absent Friends. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but it has this tremendous feeling of emotional closure for me. First, from a strictly sonic perspective, I need to say I absolutely love the atmospheres you've created here. From the powerfully evocative sounds of nature as the song begins, transporting the listener from the largely artificial, highly technologized environment in which I spend too much time, into nature and even childhood in very powerful ways. But also the very potent emotional journey on which this epic takes the listener from something very organic and rooted in the acoustic into a much more progressive and orchestral environment, one that makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time I hear it. And then ultimately back to nature's embrace at the song's end. Just person to person, I want to thank you so much for this piece, as it's become an essential feature of my emotional landscape from the first time I heard it several years ago. shortly after we first started talking. But learning to live with the space in between us. What space? And between you and whom? And why?
Wow. I think you've got another hour on the show.
Well, this is the last show. This is the last time slot of the day, so we're time unlimited. So
Amazing. Do you know what? That's amazing because I don't always do as much storytelling. There's like an ambiguity to the lyrics, but with Absent Friends, it's very specific in the verses. And I always thought that what speaks to people, and I'm sure it does, but equally, I've been so surprised when people come back to me and quote the chorus at me.
yeah, you were saying how you were perhaps surprised at how the chorus might have resonated with more people than you expected, than the more specific content of the verses.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think as well, what it just brought to mind was what I was just telling you about the Einstein scenario with his theory of general relativity, where somebody else's perspective shows you that the creation is bigger than your own perception of it. So I think that was a beautiful gift for me from lots of different people to sort of put that thought in my mind, because I hadn't arrived there on my own. And as a piece of like writing, musically, it was one of the first things when I was teaching myself how to do finger picking, because I came back to acoustic guitar, having been a drummer previously for 5 years in like a quite an extreme metal band. So when I actually then re-picked up the guitar after many years and started to play guitar, I didn't want to just strum your traditional chords. I wanted to learn how to finger pick and get involved in open tuning, because I wasn't really interested enough in the regular kind of format. So musically, that was a real gift. When I discovered that riff, I was like, wow, I love this riff. And then lyrically, I feel like looking back, there was a sense that there was something vicarious about it. And I felt like I was articulating the loss that people very close to me, at least a couple of people come to mind, that they were experiencing directly. And then as a consequence, I realized that, well, obviously it's my own experience of loss that enables me to identify that and represent those people with how I've put the lyrics together. So the space in between us, and yeah, it's a brilliant question. So I guess if we look at it physically, it comes back to the whole concept of the album of somebody trying to reconcile the experience of physical loss with retaining somebody's energetic presence in their mind. So yeah. Oh, we've got someone else contributing.
Yes. Someone else's outside view.
Yeah, that's my sausage dog. So yeah, I suppose if we think about the chorus lyrics, learning to live with the space in between us, the space we both shared, then the space in between us is the apparent separation between the person who's still in the world and the person who isn't. And that, I guess, is also explains the difference between who the we and them is as well. So it's kind of like coming at the same metaphysical scenario from the two different levels. Of the physical level of like the person isn't there anymore, and because the person isn't there anymore, then you could say that they're two different people.
Yes.
And also with, say, like the Nobel Prize for Physics last year was given to 3 people who proved that localized consciousness simply doesn't exist. And if anybody's interested, I suggest that they would look that up rather than my sort of short snippet on it. But essentially, the sciences have caught up with the spirituality that dates back to the Indian Bhagavad Gita texts, which are thousands of years before Christianity and whatnot,
Right.
where they already understood quantum mechanics and wave theories. And yeah, science has caught up. So science now has said there's no such thing as localized consciousness. So in a sense, again, it's just about this. It's just about finding a sweet spot with your own philosophy or understanding that says, I don't know, I don't know where this ends and where that begins. I don't know what happens after someone leaves their body. I don't know where I go, but don't try and bother to sort of pin that down to a definition. Just simply leave it as it is. And you don't know what's outside the virtual reality headset. So don't worry about it. If you want to think there is something or there isn't something, then that's your choice. But you won't find out until you take the headset off anyway.
Well, thank you so much for that. The Absent Friends is one of those pieces for me. And I say this as I hope the compliment I hope it comes through as the compliment that I mean it to be, in that it quite often moves me to tears, and that's not something that's easy for me, but is always very cleansing, both for the sweetness and the innocence of the one voice, and the power of the other. There's just such a breadth of human experience spanning that one piece, and I'm very grateful for it. We're talking with Leon Russell of WARMRAIN, and it's my great pleasure to you to introduce as the last track of the evening, Absent Friends from WARMRAIN's epic concept album, Back Above the Clouds. You're listening to Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm Brad Wallace.
Looking through pictures today, there's no sign of you. You have been taken away, that much is true. Stopped by the house yesterday, though I knew you weren't there. Sat down to watch the birds fly from your favorite chair. Memories came flooding back of the good times we've had. The sound of your voice in my head, things don't seem so bad. Learning to live with the space in between us, learning to live in the space we won't share. To live with the space in between us. is left to say. I wish you could hear. So many moments I'll face when I wish you were near. Accepting the ways of this world with the seasons that pass. It's you that I'll have on my mind as I'm raising my glass. Learning to live with the space in between us. Learning to live in the space we won't share. Learning to live with the space in between us. space in between us. Learning to live in the space we once shared.
And that was Absent Friends from Back Above the Clouds. I'm here with Leon J. Russell of Warm Rain, and it's been such a privilege to chat with you tonight. I couldn't have asked for a better first meet, a better first date, as it were, having interacted with you only in 2 dimensions for 3 years. But I've long considered you, perhaps surprisingly, among my closest friends and confidants, and certainly a brother. You've struck me as somebody who's been very important for me to know and to get to know. And I've been very grateful to have the opportunity to do that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can you, in the last couple of minutes, please let us know what is on the horizon for you creatively, what the next project is? Please.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a completely written solo album.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I've got 6 tracks that I'm really, really pleased with, and it's my intention to present that to the world in the near future. I've shared some stuff with you over the last couple of years, little snippets of it, but yeah, it's ready, it's sitting there, the time's right. So yeah, I'm going to release that under my name.
Beautiful.
And the album's going to be called Auto-Generated by Life.
I have to say, Leon, that is an album title that defies the cliche. One has never heard that title before. I don't know if you find the same thing when I'm naming tracks or albums. There's, and I thought, I finally come up with one that no one's ever used before. I have a song named Waxing Solipsistic that I thought no one else would ever have used. Search on Spotify. Of course, there are 200 of them already. But yours, I think, must stand unique. But well, that's very exciting. Did you have a time frame for its release?
I want to pretty much jump on it, to be fair, in a couple of things to deal with in the immediate future, and then I'm ready to present it. Yeah, because it's really lovely. It's like the Run to the Sun-esque side of the Warm Rain sound. It still sounds like Warm Rain as
Wonderful.
such.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah. Hopefully ASAP, my friend.
Well, hopefully for all of us. And I want to thank you once again for joining us on the No Commercial Potential show tonight on the Cosmos Astrum Radio. This has been Leon Russell of Warm Rain, and I'm your host, Brad Wallace. It's been my privilege to spend this evening with Leon. Have a good night, everyone, and be careful out there.